The cold bit at Tessa Vain's pale fingers as she pushed her way through the knee-deep snow. Her breath came in short clouds, the last light of the Colorado sun sinking behind jagged peaks that turned the world to blue and gray. She hadn't meant to wander so far from the trail. The mountains had looked beautiful in the distance, peaceful even, and her curiosity had led her deeper until she no longer knew which way was home. "Hello?" she called, her voice small in the vast wilderness. "Is anyone there?" Only the wind answered. It hissed through the pine trees and whipped strands of her chestnut hair across her face. She clutched her wool coat tighter around her frame, wishing she had listened to her aunt's warnings about venturing into the mountains alone. She had only arrived in Silverdale the day before, fresh from Boston, carrying more grief than luggage. Her parents were gone, both lost within a year, and she had come west searching for peace. But now, as the daylight vanished, that decision felt like madness. Her fingers burned with cold, then turned numb. The snow came up past her boots, soaking through her skirts. A wolf's howl echoed somewhere in the distance, low and haunting. Tessa froze, her heart thudding painfully. The stories she'd heard about mountain predators came flooding back. Wolves, cougars, worse things that waited for night to fall. She forced herself forward, stumbling through the drifts until her legs trembled with exhaustion. The trees all looked the same, dark shapes closing in around her. She had been walking for hours, she realized, with no sign of the path she had left. The last bit of sunlight bled away, leaving her alone in shadow. Tessa tripped over a hidden rock and fell hard onto her knees. The cold seeped through her clothes, and for a moment she didn't move. Her strength was gone. Tears stung her eyes, hot against her frozen cheeks. She was 22 years old, and she had survived the loss of her family and a journey across the country, only to die alone on a mountain because she had been too stubborn to turn back. Maybe this was how it ended. Maybe she would simply fall asleep and never wake up again. Then she heard it, a sound that didn't belong to the wind, the soft crunch of hooves in the snow. Her head snapped up. Through the darkness, she saw a moving shadow, tall and steady. "Hello," she called, her voice shaking. "Please, help me." The rider turned toward her voice, guiding his horse through the trees. As he drew closer, she saw a man in a long coat astride a chestnut horse. A wide-brimmed hat hid most of his face, but his voice carried clear and deep across the snow. "Ma'am, what in God's name are you doing out here alone?" Relief flooded her chest so suddenly she almost cried. The stranger dismounted quickly, boots crunching on frozen ground as he came to her side. When he knelt, the fading light revealed a face roughened by wind and sun, with eyes the clear blue of a summer sky. "I got lost," she said, ashamed of how small her voice sounded. "I thought I could find the way back before dark, but—" "These mountains don't forgive mistakes easily," he said, his tone kind but firm. He stood and extended a gloved hand. "Name's Cade Blackwell. My cabin's not far from here. Can you ride?" She took his hand, startled by how warm his grip felt. "Tessa Vain, and yes, I can ride." "Good, that'll make things easier." He led her to his horse, a strong animal named Samson. "He's steady," Cade said. With surprising gentleness, he helped her into the saddle, then swung up behind her. His arms came around her to hold the reins, the solid warmth of his chest against her back driving away the cold. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't found me." "Let's not think on that," Cade said quietly. "Just focus on staying warm." They rode through the dark woods, the rhythm of hooves steady and sure. The only other sound was the whisper of the wind in the trees. Tessa tried to study her rescuer when she could. He moved with the ease of a man who knew every inch of this land, guiding the horse without hesitation even as the night deepened. "Are you from Silverdale?" she asked softly. "No," he replied. "I keep to myself mostly. Got a small spread a few miles out. Raise cattle, do some hunting." "A cowboy then, quote." He chuckled, the sound low and warm against her ear. "That's what folks call me, though I've done my share of other work too." After a while, a golden light appeared ahead, a single window glowing through the dark. "That's my place," he said. "Not fancy, but it's dry and warm." As they approached, Tessa saw a sturdy log cabin set against the slope, smoke curling from its chimney. Cade dismounted first and then helped her down. Her legs buckled from cold and fatigue, and he caught her before she fell. "Easy," he said, steadying her. "Let's get you inside." The cabin's warmth enveloped her the moment they stepped in. A fire burned bright in a stone hearth, the scent of pine wood filling the air. The room was simple. A table, a rocking chair, a bed in the corner, but cozy. Books lined one wall, surprising her. "You read," she said softly. Cade smiled faintly as he hung his hat. "When the snow comes, there's not much else to do." He poured water into a pot and set it to boil. "Sit close to the fire. I'll make coffee and find us something to eat." Quote. Tessa obeyed, sinking into the rocking chair. The heat made her fingers ache as feeling returned. She watched him move around the small kitchen with practiced ease, slicing bread and cheese, setting a plate in front of her. "It's not much," he said, "but it'll do." "It's perfect," she said, grateful beyond words. "I can't thank you enough, Mr. Blackwell." "Cade," he corrected gently. "No need for formalities out here." As they ate, she told him about her journey from Boston and her plans to stay with her aunt in Silverdale. Cade listened quietly, his expression thoughtful. "Your aunt must be worried sick," he said. "Martha Vain, right?" Tessa blinked. "You know her?" "Everyone in Silverdale knows everyone," Cade said. He looked out the window at the darkness. "Too dangerous to go back tonight." "You'll stay here till morning." Tessa hesitated. "But I couldn't possibly. It wouldn't be proper." "I'll sleep in the barn," he said simply. "You take the bed, unless you'd rather face the cold again." Faced with that choice, Tessa nodded. "Thank you. You're very kind." Quote. "It's what anyone would do," Cade said, though she wasn't sure that was true. As he stepped outside to tend the horse, Tessa looked around the small cabin. The books, the firelight, the quiet. It felt strangely safe. She realized, as she warmed her hands by the fire, that this stranger had not only saved her life, but had already begun to change it. Morning came softly to the mountains, sunlight spilling across the wooden floor of Cade's cabin. Tessa stirred beneath a thick quilt, the warmth almost dreamlike after the bitter cold of the previous night. For a brief moment, she forgot where she was. Then the sound of boots outside and the smell of coffee reminded her. She sat up, smoothing her rumpled dress and taming her hair as best she could. A light knock came before the door opened. Cade stepped in, holding a steaming mug and a folded bundle of clothes. "Morning," he said with a small nod. "Figured you could use this. The clothes belonged to my sister when she visited last summer. They'll be warmer for the ride down." Tessa accepted both gratefully. "Thank you. You have family nearby?" "Not close," Cade replied, setting the mug on the table. "Sarah lives in Denver with her husband. She'd have my hide if she knew I let you freeze out here." When he stepped outside to give her privacy, Tessa changed into the clothing, a wool shirt, a heavy skirt, and a coat far sturdier than her own. Everything was slightly too large, but infinitely warmer. When she emerged, Cade had 2 horses saddled. "This one's Willow," he said, patting the dapple-gray mare's neck. "She's sure-footed. You'll ride her down." "You're lending me a horse?" Tessa asked, surprised. Cade shrugged. "You can send her back with one of the town boys, or keep her if you'd like. I've got more than I need." Tessa hesitated, moved by his generosity. "That's too kind. I couldn't possibly." "You can," he said gently, his blue eyes meeting hers, "and you will." The journey down the mountain was easier than Tessa expected. The daylight revealed a breathtaking landscape of snow-dusted pines, frozen streams, and cliffs that stretched toward the sky. Cade rode beside her, his movements calm and confident as he guided them through narrow trails. "How do you never lose your way?" she asked after a while. Cade smiled faintly. "Time and experience. These mountains have a language of their own. You just have to learn how to listen." "Then perhaps you'll teach me," Tessa said, half teasing, half serious. He glanced at her, something unreadable in his gaze. "You plan on wandering these hills again?" Maybe not alone, she admitted, smiling, but I'd like to see more of this country. It feels alive. Cade didn't answer, but the corner of his mouth curved upward. By mid-morning, the trees began to thin and a valley spread before them. Smoke rose from chimneys, and the small town of Silverdale came into view. Your aunt's place is there, Cade said, pointing to a white house on the far edge. Looks like there's quite a crowd. As they rode closer, Tessa saw figures gathered outside, and her heart sank. Her aunt, Tessa Vain, stood on the porch with a man on horseback who looked to be giving orders. That's Sheriff Daniels, Cade explained. Looks like they were getting ready to send a search party. Oh dear, Tessa murmured. I've caused such trouble. Not your fault, Cade said calmly. These mountains can fool even the best of us. When they reached the yard, the sheriff turned his horse toward them. Blackwell, he greeted curtly. Found another stray? Cade's tone stayed even. Miss Vain got turned around in the hills. Found her before nightfall and brought her back this morning. Mighty convenient, the sheriff said, suspicion flickering in his eyes. Tessa bristled. Mr. Blackwell saved my life, Sheriff. If not for him, I'd have frozen to death. Her aunt hurried forward, her relief spilling into her words. Oh, my dear girl, we've been worried, sick. She reached up to help Tessa down from Willow's back. Come inside before you catch your death. Tessa turned to Cade as she dismounted. I owe you more than I can ever repay. He tipped his hat, expression unreadable. Just glad I was close enough to hear you call. Please, she said impulsively, stay for coffee. My aunt makes the best apple pie in Colorado. Before he could reply, Martha interjected firmly. That's kind, but I'm sure Mr. Blackwell has work waiting for him. Cade gave a small, polite nod. Your aunt's right. Best I head home. Tessa's heart dipped, but she smiled. Then, thank you again. Take care, Miss Vain. With that, he turned Samson toward the mountains. Inside, Martha fussed over Tessa. Warm blankets, tea, a fire burning bright. Once Tessa had settled, her aunt folded her arms. I can't believe you wandered off on your very first day. The Lord must have sent that man. I was foolish, Tessa admitted, but he was kind, truly kind. Martha's expression softened slightly. Cade Blackwell is decent enough, keeps to himself mostly. Still, you should be cautious. Cautious? Why? Martha hesitated, then sighed. There was a robbery in Riverton a few years back. A man was killed. Some folks said one of the robbers looked a bit like Blackwell. He had an alibi, mind you, but rumors stick. Tessa frowned. He doesn't seem capable of such a thing. He's gentle. Maybe so, Martha said. But people change out here. The war changed a lot of men. Just promise me you'll keep your wits about you. I will, Tessa said softly, but her heart didn't agree. That night, long after Martha had gone to bed, Tessa lay awake staring at the ceiling. The flicker of the fire cast faint shadows that reminded her of the cabin's hearth. The warmth, the quiet, the steady sound of Cade's voice, telling her stories of the mountains. She could still see the way the light had caught in his blue eyes when he smiled. Whatever her aunt believed, Tessa was certain of one thing. Cade Blackwell had saved her life. And somewhere deep inside her, she felt that their paths were not yet finished crossing. The next week passed quickly. Silverdale was small but lively, and Martha wasted no time introducing her niece to every respectable household. Tessa smiled and nodded through endless conversations, but her thoughts often drifted toward the mountains. Every time a tall man passed by wearing a wide-brimmed hat, her heart skipped, only to sink again when it wasn't him. Then, one morning in the general store, she finally saw him. Cade stood at the counter, trading supplies for pelts. His back was to her, but she knew that frame instantly. Good morning, Mr. Blackwell, Mrs. Henderson was saying. Will you be coming to the harvest dance Saturday? Not planning on it, Cade replied. That's a shame. Martha Vain's niece will be there. Tessa froze. Mrs. Henderson glanced her way with a knowing smile. Cade stiffened slightly, then turned, and their eyes met. Mrs. Vain, he said politely, tipping his hat. Martha stepped forward, beaming. Mr. Blackwell, we never thanked you properly for rescuing my niece. You must come to dinner Sunday." "That's very kind, but—" "No refusals," Martha interrupted. 2 o'clock sharp. "And wear your good shirt." Tessa blushed, caught between amusement and embarrassment. "My aunt can be very persuasive," she said softly once Martha turned away. Cade's mouth curved. "So I see." His voice dropped slightly. "Have you been, Miss Vain? No more adventures in the mountains?" "None," she said, smiling, "though I've been admiring them from afar." "They're worth admiring," he said, his gaze lingering just a second too long. "But don't forget, they demand respect." "I won't," Tessa promised. "And I still have Willow, by the way. She's wonderful." "Glad to hear it," Cade said. "She deserves a gentle rider." He picked up his supplies, hesitated, then said, "About Sunday. Tell your aunt I'll be there." When he walked out into the sunlight, Tessa felt warmth rise to her cheeks. She told herself it was from the stove. But deep down, she knew it wasn't. Sunday arrived cold and bright, the first true whisper of winter in the air. The smell of roast chicken and apple pie filled Martha Vain's kitchen as she and Tessa prepared for their guest. Tessa tried to appear calm, but her hands trembled slightly as she arranged the table. "He's just a friend, Aunt Martha," she said when her aunt gave her a knowing look. "Of course," Martha replied, the corner of her mouth twitching. "A friend who risked his neck to save you in a snowstorm. I'd say that's a bit more than a friend, wouldn't you?" Before Tessa could answer, a knock sounded at the door. Cade stood on the porch, hat in hand, wearing a clean white shirt and dark vest. His hair had been combed neatly back, and he held a small bunch of wildflowers, faded but beautiful. "Mr. Blackwell," Martha greeted, smiling, "right on time. Please come in." Cade stepped inside, his eyes finding Tessa at once. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Then he extended the flowers awkwardly. "For you both," he said. "They're the last I could find before the frost." "How thoughtful," Martha said, taking them. "Tessa, put these in water and show Mr. Blackwell to the dining room." The meal passed more easily than Tessa expected. Cade, though quiet, spoke with warmth and intelligence, describing his life in the mountains and the small herd of cattle he kept. He had a rough charm, softened by sincerity, and even Martha seemed impressed. "You cook, read, and build cabins," she said with a raised brow. "Quite the capable man, Mr. Blackwell." "Out here, man learns what he must to get by," Cade replied modestly. After dinner, they moved to the sitting room for coffee. Cade noticed the shelves lined with books and smiled. "You're a reading family," he said. "My brother, Tessa's father, collected them," Martha explained. Cade's hand brushed the spine of one leather-bound volume. "Thoreau. I've got this one myself." "You've read Walden?" Tessa asked, surprised. A flicker of hurt crossed his face. "Yes, Miss Vain. Even cowboys can read." "I didn't mean," she began, then stopped, embarrassed. "It's one of my favorites." The tension eased. "Mine too," Cade said softly. He understood what it means to live deliberately. They shared a small smile that spoke volumes, and Martha pretended not to notice. When it came time for Cade to leave, Martha pressed a basket into his hands. "Leftovers," she said briskly, "and a slice of pie. You'll be back for the harvest dance, I trust." Cade hesitated. "I'm not much for dancing." "Nonsense," Martha said. "Every man can dance if he has the right partner." Her eyes twinkled as she glanced toward Tessa. Cade's lips curved slightly. "Then maybe I'll reconsider." He met Tessa's gaze. "Good night, Miss Vain." "Good night, Mr. Blackwell," she replied, her heart fluttering as he stepped out into the cool night. The week passed slowly. When the night of the harvest dance arrived, Tessa wore a soft blue dress that matched her eyes. The town hall glowed with lamplight, laughter spilling into the cold air. Martha beamed as they entered. "Smile, dear, it's a celebration." Tessa smiled, but her eyes drifted constantly toward the door. He won't come, she told herself. Then the room went still. Cade Blackwell stood in the doorway, looking slightly uncomfortable in a dark suit, his hat held against his chest. Conversation faltered. whispers spreading as he scanned the crowd, and found her. "Mr. Blackwell," Martha greeted with obvious satisfaction. "What a pleasant surprise." Cade nodded politely. "Would you care to dance, Miss Vain?" Quote, "I thought you weren't much for dancing," Tessa teased. "Maybe I just needed the right reason." When his hand touched hers, something inside her steadied. The music swelled, a waltz. Cade's arms slid around her waist, his movements graceful despite his size. "You dance beautifully," she murmured. "My mother insisted I learn," he said, smiling faintly. "Said a gentleman should always know how to guide a lady." As they moved across the floor, people watched, but Tessa no longer cared. The world seemed to narrow to the warmth of Cade's hand, the quiet strength in his eyes. When the music ended, he didn't release her hand. "Would you like to step outside? It's warm in here." She nodded, grateful for the excuse. The porch outside was cool and quiet, stars scattered across a deep black sky. For a moment they stood in silence, the music faint behind them. "You didn't have to come tonight," she said softly. "I wanted to," Cade admitted. "I wanted to see you again." The honesty in his voice made her heart ache. "I'm glad you did." Quote, he looked at her then, the emotion in his eyes impossible to hide. "You're not like anyone I've ever met, Tessa." "And you're not like anyone I expected to find out here," she whispered. He took a step closer. "This isn't wise. People talk. You deserve better than a man like me." "Maybe I get to decide what I deserve," she said, her voice trembling but sure. "You saved my life, Cade. But more than that, you've shown me what it means to live honestly. To listen to the quiet. That's worth more than all the fine words in Boston." Cade's breath caught. "Tessa, dance with me," she whispered, holding out her hand. "Here, under the stars." He hesitated only a moment before taking it. They began to sway to the faint music drifting through the open door. The cold air wrapped around them, the scent of pine and wood smoke mingling with the warmth between them. "I haven't felt like this since before the war," Cade said quietly. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Like I finally found something worth holding on to." Their movements slowed. Cade's hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing lightly against her skin. "May I call on you properly?" he asked, his voice rough. "With my aunt's permission," she said, smiling through the tears that welled in her eyes. "I'd like that." He nodded, his own smile soft. "Then I'll come tomorrow." He didn't kiss her, not then, but the promise was in his eyes. Weeks passed, filled with visits, long rides, and shared laughter. Cade built her confidence in the saddle, taught her how to read the clouds and listen to the wind. In return, she brought warmth and laughter into his solitary life. When the snow returned, he arrived one evening, with frost in his beard and exhaustion in his eyes. Without thinking, Tessa ran to him and threw her arms around his neck. "I was worried," she said, her voice muffled against his coat. "It takes more than a storm to keep me from you," he murmured. That night, sitting before the fire, he finally spoke the words she had been waiting to hear. "Tessa, I've been thinking of building a new cabin closer to town," he said. "It's hard to stay away when everything I want is here." Her heart swelled. "You mean," quote, "I mean you," he said simply. "If you'll have me, I want to build a life with you." Tessa's answer came in a whisper, but it carried all the truth in her heart. "Yes, Cade. I will." He smiled then, the kind of smile that reached his eyes. When he bent to kiss her, it was gentle and certain, sealing the promise between them. Spring came to Silverdale, and the town gathered for their wedding. The church bells rang clear, echoing off the mountains. Martha cried openly, and Cade stood tall and proud, the happiest man in Colorado. Later that evening, as the sun set behind the peaks, Tessa stood with her husband on the porch of their new home. Cade's arm slid around her shoulders, drawing her close. "Happy?" he asked softly. "Completely," she said. "Though sometimes I think about that day, the snow, the cold. How easily I might have been lost forever." Cade smiled, pressing his forehead against hers. "You were never lost, Tessa. The mountains just led you to me." Quote, As stars bloomed above them and the wind whispered through the pines, she knew he was right. She had gone looking for peace in the wilderness and found love instead. Together, they had built not just shelter, but a home. And every time she looked at the mountains, she was reminded of the day the cowboy found her and changed her life forever.